On October 9, 2004, in the Kingdom of Morocco, specifically in the capital Rabat, the police station received a report from a Moroccan family stating that their son, Murad, had suddenly disappeared without a trace. The police responded immediately and began searching for him, but their attempts to find him failed at first. After days of intensive searching, Murad was found murdered inside an abandoned house under mysterious circumstances. The scene was terrifying. The victim's hands were tied with a rope, and there was a clear injury with a sharp object that cut his hand vein, which caused his death. But the biggest surprise was in the strange details that investigators found at the crime scene. On the mirror of the room, a phrase was written using the victim's blood, 1/5. This phrase raised many questions for investigators. What does it mean? And why was this method chosen to leave a message? The police felt that this crime was not ordinary, and perhaps it was the beginning of a more terrifying series. The second shock came just 2 days after the discovery of Murad's body. The police received a new report about the murder of another young man named Issam al-Suwaidi. He was found in a popular cafe, but the cause of death was unusual. After examination, it turned out that he had consumed an unknown substance in his cup of tea, which led to his death. As happened in the first crime, there was something strange at the crime scene. This time, another message was found written on the cafe's bathroom mirror, written in the same style as before, 2/5. This message was a new mystery that shocked and worried investigators. Why were these symbols chosen? And what message did the killer want to convey? It seemed clear that there was a common thread between the two crimes, and that the series of crimes was not over yet. Despite the police's efforts, there were clear indications that the first and second crimes were committed by the same person. This discovery increased the investigators' confusion, prompting them to summon a large group of eyewitnesses who were present in the cafe during the second crime. The interrogations began with the aim of collecting any thread that could lead them to the perpetrator. When the witnesses were asked, their statements were similar. The situation was completely normal until Issam suddenly started screaming, and a few moments later he died in front of everyone. The strange thing is that Issam did not show any previous signs of being attacked. After his body was transferred to the forensic medicine department and the cause of death report was issued, it turned out that Issam died from a large dose of poison. The investigators began investigating the workers in the cafe on the grounds that one of them might have been behind the poisoning, but no evidence was found to incriminate any of them. Here, the police realized that they were dealing with a dangerous and professional person, so they began to develop elaborate plans to track down the perpetrator. However, it seemed that this person was always one step ahead of them. The police received a new report from a group of residents who had witnessed a fire in a car in the Harhura forest area. When they arrived at the site, they found the car completely burned, with a person inside fighting for his life. The rescuers managed to get the young man out and take him to the hospital, where the investigators were later able to identify him. His name was Samir, and he was identified from his ID card and some papers he had with him. But the biggest surprise was the writing they found on the window of the burned car. It was written on the back window, 3/5. Here the police realized that there was a common pattern in the crimes, as the numbers 1/5 and February 5th appeared in the previous two crimes. Investigators confirmed that this number indicated that the perpetrator was planning to commit 5 crimes, and that 3 of them had already occurred. But the identity of the perpetrator and his motives remained a mystery. The case remained a complete mystery to the police, until an unexpected development occurred. Samir regained consciousness from the coma and began asking the investigators, "Who did this?" After trying to talk despite his deteriorating health, Samir revealed that he knew why the killer targeted them. Although he was able to provide some information with difficulty, he died in the hospital 2 days later, leaving behind a bigger mystery. The information Samir provided was not enough to solve the case, but it turned the police's calculations upside down. This prompted the investigators to quickly deploy their security forces in an attempt to rescue the remaining 2 targeted victims. But the killer, as usual, was always one step ahead of them. During the search, the police found the body of the fourth victim, Khaled Al-Mutawa, inside his car. The method of killing was similar to previous crimes, with a familiar clue, the number 4 of 5 written on the car window. Investigations revealed that the killer used pepper spray to incapacitate the victim before killing him, the same method used with Murad and Samir. The investigators realized that what they were facing was a serial killer who was carrying out crimes in a systematic manner, but they were still unable to find any concrete evidence. The complexity of the matter was increased by the lack of technical means available in 2004, as cameras were not as widespread as they are today, which made the task even more difficult. Here an important question comes to mind: what did Samir tell the investigators in the hospital before his death? The biggest shock came when Samir revealed a horrific truth. He said that all the victims, including him, Khaled Al-Mutawa, and a fifth person, were involved in a girl's kidnapping incident some time ago. According to Samir, they had seen the girl walking alone in one of the streets of Rabat, so they kidnapped her using a car, then took her to an abandoned house in the forest. It turned out that the abandoned house that Samir spoke about was the same place where the body of the first victim, Murad, was found. Samir revealed that the girl they kidnapped had been held in a room inside that house for 3 days. During this period, she was repeatedly assaulted by them, without being given food or drink, which led to her condition deteriorating dramatically. Samir explained that he believed that the crimes they targeted might have been motivated by revenge against one of the girl's relatives or someone close to her. However, the group had no information about her identity or name. The police relied on Samir's confessions to charge him with kidnapping and assault. However, just 2 days after he made his confessions, he died from the severe injuries he sustained in the fire. Despite these developments, the identity of the killer remained unknown. While the police were trying to solve the mystery of the case, they suddenly received a message from an unknown person claiming to be the killer. At first, the investigators doubted the validity of the claim, believing it was just an attempt to stir up controversy. However, the message included precise details about how the crimes were carried out, which made them seriously reconsider the matter. Here the question remains: who sent this message? And who is the real victim in this dark story? Share your opinion. Do you think the sender is the real killer? Or are there other details that have not yet been revealed? The biggest shock came when the police revealed the identity of the sender of the mysterious message. The surprise was that the sender was not a relative of the girl or one of her acquaintances, but rather the girl herself. In her message, Fatima Khaled narrated her entire story with the 5 young men, explaining all the crimes she committed to take revenge on them after the law failed her. The story began in mid-2004 when Fatima Khaled, a graduate of the Faculty of Pharmacy, decided to leave her hometown of Wezane for the capital, Rabat, in search of a suitable job. Fatima was an ambitious young woman with big dreams, but she was not familiar enough with the capital's neighborhoods, which made her take a dangerous street, without knowing what awaited her. The street was crowded with suspicious people, who could be described as drug dealers and prostitutes, which made Fatima feel afraid and wanted to leave the place immediately. While she was trying to get out of the area, a black car suddenly stopped in front of her. A person dressed in black got out of it and quickly kidnapped her and put her in the car. Inside the car, there were 3 other people. 2 of them sat next to her, holding her tightly between them, while the third was driving the car. Fatima tried to beg them and shout, saying, "I am not from this area. I am not the girl you are looking for." But one of them slapped her hard and ordered her to be quiet. Fatima was terrified, but she tried to focus on the road, trying to memorize the directions in the hope that she would be able to locate the place later. The car continued driving until it reached a remote dirt area, far from the city. Unfortunately, when the kidnappers covered Fatima's eyes, they deprived her of any chance to memorize the route they took. However, she tried to calculate the distance based on the time it took the car to drive. A few minutes after they entered the dirt road, the car stopped. They got her out and removed the blindfold from her eyes, and she found herself in a deserted area far from the city, in front of an old, abandoned house. The men took her inside this house, and there her suffering began. They locked her in an isolated room and continued to brutally assault her for 3 consecutive days. They did not provide her with food or drink during this period, which increased her suffering. At the end of the 3 days, they returned her to the car, covered her eyes again, and then threw her in the same place from which they kidnapped her. Fatima emerged from the experience in a devastated psychological state. She thought about how her family and society would react to what had happened to her. She felt so ashamed and let down that she contemplated suicide. But she decided to face what had happened and take her rights into her own hands. Fatima went to the police station to file a report against the attackers. But the encounter with the police was a new shock. They began asking her for information she did not have, such as the names of the perpetrators or the license plate number. They also asked her for a medical report proving that she had been assaulted, which she did not have. What was worse, the police downplayed her report, justifying it by saying that they received similar complaints from prostitutes who claimed the same thing after disputes with their clients. This response was a crushing disappointment for Fatima. She left the police station broken, losing faith that the law could restore her rights. Later, when she consulted a lawyer, he assured her that the police's position was expected due to the lack of evidence, and that her chances of getting justice were very slim. At that moment, Fatima realized that the law would not do her justice. So she decided to close the door of the law completely, and take back her rights with her own hand, no matter the cost. From here, the features of Fatima's new personality began to emerge, a personality that was no longer ruled by fear, but rather sought revenge and regained her dignity with her own hand. She decided to plan every step carefully and calmly. The first thing she had to do was to find out the identity of the 5 young men who kidnapped her. For days after the painful incident, she gathered her courage and decided to return to the place where they had taken her. She knew that any small detail would help her, so she took a taxi, described the road she remembered to the driver, and asked him to head towards a suspicious place on a dirt road. When they reached the road, Fatima felt like she had returned to part of the nightmare. She got out of the car and started walking alone, looking for the abandoned house. Despite the terror that was creeping into her heart, she continued searching with strong determination. In the end, she was able to find the place. The house was part of an abandoned farm in an area completely devoid of residents. All the horror she had experienced during those 3 days came back to her, but she held herself together and swore that this place would be the beginning of her revenge. Although she did not find any of the criminals there, she memorized the location well to keep it in her memory. Fatima returned home and started thinking of a new plan to reach the criminals. She noticed that the street from which they kidnapped her was next to a cafe known for serving shisha, so she decided to start from there. Fatima began to visit that place daily, disguised as a beggar wearing shabby clothes, sitting near the cafe and watching cautiously. She felt that fate would stand by her one day. She remained focused in her position, determined to meet one of the criminals. And indeed, after several days of continuous surveillance, she spotted him. One of the 5 young men who kidnapped her suddenly appeared in front of her. And she saw how happy she was. She continued to watch him until he got out in his car, and she followed him in a taxi until she reached his house and discovered that he lived in a large villa near the road from which she was kidnapped. Fatima knew the location of the young man's house who assaulted her and memorized it well, but she decided to postpone her plan for another day to make sure she would carry it out accurately. The next day, she headed to the villa, stood in front of the door and rang the bell. Moments later, the young man opened the door, and he looked astonished when he saw her. She was the girl they had assaulted earlier. He asked her in surprise, "How did you know where my house was?" She replied confidently, "Listen, I know you are shocked, and I am shocked too. But we have to talk calmly and in a place far from any noise or scandals. If you refuse, I swear to God I will disgrace you in front of your family and scream and gather people here against you. The decision is yours. Come with me like a respectable person, or bear the consequences." The young man was from a well-known family with a high status in the area, so he feared the scandal and decided to accompany them to avoid problems. They got into the car and headed to the same abandoned house that witnessed the crime. Inside the house, Fatima started talking to him kindly to reassure him. He did not suspect her at all, which gave her the opportunity to carry out her plan. Suddenly, she took out a pepper spray and sprayed it on his face and eyes, causing him severe pain and causing him to fall to the ground screaming. Fatima did not waste time and took out a narcotic substance from her pocket and applied it to his face until he lost consciousness completely. She took the opportunity to search the place until she found a rope, tied his hands well, and then dragged him to the room where they had raped her before. There, she placed his body on the carpet after taking off his clothes, and sat waiting for him to wake up. When he woke up, he found himself tied up in front of Fatima, who was holding a razor in one hand and a voice recorder in the other. She looked at him steadfastly and said, "Listen, don't tire me out and I won't tire you out. Give me now all the information about the young men who were with you that night, or I swear to God I will slaughter you right here and now." The young man tried to evade and beg. "Forgive me, I am ready to marry you. Please, release me." But Fatima did not respond, and without hesitation she cut his chest and stomach with the razor, causing severe bleeding. Upon seeing the blood, he completely collapsed and began crying and screaming, then confessed everything he knew about his partners, their names, locations, numbers, and all the other details. But Fatima had not planned to leave him alive from the beginning. Once she got everything she wanted, she cut his vein with the razor and left him to bleed to death. Before leaving, she wrote a sentence in his blood on the room's mirror that left its mark, then left the house quietly. The next day, Fatima began to monitor Isam, one of the partners in crime that Murad had described to her. She followed his movements daily without him noticing, until she knew his daily routine. He used to visit a cafe on Al Ben Abdallah Street every day at 4 in the afternoon. One day, Fatima prepared herself well. She put on full makeup and completely changed her appearance to appear as a different person. She disguised herself as a street vendor selling products, and entered the cafe where Isam was sitting. She began to walk between the tables while watching him from the corner of her eye. When the waiter brought Isam's order, which was mint tea, she waited for the right moment. She approached him to display her products, and with her intelligence she was able to attract his attention and completely distract him by talking about the products. At that moment, she carried out her next step lightly and quickly without him noticing anything. She poured him poison in the teacup, colorless and tasteless. A very strong poison. Then she left the cafe calmly and sat watching from afar. Only a few minutes later, Isam was screaming and writhing in pain. "Here." Fatima withdrew and entered the bathrooms quietly and wrote on the bathroom mirror with her lipstick 2/5. Then she returned home as if nothing had happened. She took out the number of the third person from the recording she had with her and which she had taken from Murad. He responded to her in surprise. "Who is this?" "Hello." "Hello. Who are you?" She said to him, "Look, honestly, I am a girl who has admired you for a long time. I admire you and I want you to give me a date such and such. We will meet and go out together." The lover agreed of course and did not suspect her. He said, "You have a chance." And it came. And she also changed her appearance 180 degrees by 100. And she went out with him that day normally. But while they were driving in the car, she asked her to pass by her friend. She showed him to her house. And indeed, she showed him to her house, and indeed she was able to lure him to this road. There was a road with such and such, like a forest road, meaning it was isolated a bit. While they were driving, she said to her, "But we have arrived here." He stopped. Then she got out pretending to wait for her friend outside. She was making sure the place was empty and no one was watching them. Then she went back to the car again, turned from the other side where he was sitting and knocked on the car window when he rolled down. She took out a spray bottle from her pocket and sprayed it on her face and eyes until it completely covered them. Because this spray bottle burns all the time, and when she tries to get out, they say it was gasoline. She had hidden it among the trees in the place, which is what she had originally planned to do. She sprayed gasoline on the car, locked the door properly, took out a match and lit it up and set the car on fire with everyone in it, and she said to him before he died, "I am the one you assaulted." Then she wrote 3/5 on the car window. Moving on to the fourth person, Khaled al-Mutawak, who, after Fatima's investigations, she discovered that he always goes to a bar in this area. In the same way, she dressed up and got ready, and went to that bar. When she entered, she found him completely drunk. She started talking to him. Then she lured him to tell him that she wanted to go out with him. And the lover, like his brother, did not refuse. She agreed with him that they would go to a forest on the outskirts of Rabat called the Marmora Forest. Indeed, they went out that day, and when they approached the forest and stopped in it, she began to make sure whether the place was empty or not. Then she approached him and covered his mouth with a piece of cloth soaked in a very strong narcotic substance. He was drunk without needing to be. She multiplied the effect together, and one step on the other, dragged him out of the car like a sheep, threw him on the ground, then put his body on the ground in front of them and got into the car and ran over him forcefully. Then she walked over his body in the car back and forth until she was sure that he was dead. I got out of the car and wrote the word 4/5 on a piece of paper and hung it on a tree there. When we said that the young man regained consciousness in the hospital and confessed to what he did to the girl, the news spread at that time in all the newspapers and magazines in Morocco at that time. Everyone knew the story of the girl who killed the young men who assaulted her. And here is the fifth person, Al-Habib. He was struck by a psychological state of fear and terror. He said, "Are you going to kill me? My turn is coming." He quickly went and surrendered himself to the police, fearing that they would kill him too. He confessed. He told them everything. "I am one of the 5 who assaulted her, but please save me from her." Fatima later learned that he was the missing person and she was able to travel and escape the country completely, before the police could identify her. In May 2005, a letter arrived at the office of the Dean Tayyib Abdul Rahim in the house, and this letter said, "Sir, I am the girl who was raped by the 5 gang members. I executed them after they executed my dreams and prevented me from returning to my city. Despite the pain I went through, I completed my studies. When you receive this letter, the plane will have taken off with me to a faraway country, and I will never return to my country again." Fatima wrote this letter so that another innocent person who had nothing to do with the matter would not be accused. After she took her rights, Fatima has completely disappeared. And here, in your opinion, was what Fatima did justified or unjustified? Here? I will not answer. I will leave the answer for you in the comments, and thus the events of our story today have ended.